franktalks.com. The award-winning author, relationship expert, and radio personality, G.L. Henderson is bringing his show, the G.L. Henderson Radio Hour, back to ArtistFirst.com radio at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. One of the Internet's #1 radio shows and show host is back to talk about your relationships and give you the advice that will help you understand and improve your love life and relationship life. GL will have the celebrity, artist, and expert interviews you've come to love from today's most current celebrities, music artists, and experts in many different areas. Don't miss the comeback of one of the Internet's most popular hosts, Thursday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The G.L. Henderson Radio Hour. You don't want to miss it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the G.L. Henderson Radio Hour, and this is your host. That's me, G.L. And just like every week, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. You could be listening from doing anything you want to be doing right now. You know, I don't know if you're shining your shoes, looking at porn. I don't know what you're doing, but if you're tuning into my show, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, from Hawaii to Australia to New Zealand to North Carolina to New York to wherever you are. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. But we got a great show tonight. We got a really great show coming up, and it's very startling, you know, at some of the things we're probably going to be talking about tonight. So, you know, if you got real sensitive ears and you know, you don't really like choice language, then this is probably not the show you want to listen to, because we're going to be talking about sexual things tonight, and we're all adults. Well, at least I hope you are. You know, you're up at 11 o'clock listening, 10 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Pacific, so wherever you are, you should be an adult while, you know, you're listening to the show tonight. But we're going to be talking about some choice stuff. We're going to be talking about a lot of sexual stuff. So, you know, if that's not your thing, then you probably not want to tune into this show, at least not tonight. But, you know, if you do want to tune in, you know, put your big grown-up pants on and listen. I want to read some stuff to you after I say some things, because, you know, it's like I was saying, like earlier, we're talking, like we're going to be talking about sex, but it's more like sexual health, sexual things in this sex-crazed world. It's like so much stuff is going on, and it's like living a life of sexual integrity is difficult in today's lust-addicted culture. With the simple click of a mouse, guess what? Anyone can experience any expression of sexuality in seconds. Not minutes, not hours, but seconds. We're just out of control. I know we're out of control, because you know what? 40 million adults visit porn sites daily. 40 million. That means somebody right now, probably in your house, has visit porn today. Now, clicked on something. Okay, y'all got me. I'm probably in that 40 million. I'm probably in that 40 million. That's okay, though. But 40 million of us visit porn sites daily. 11 million Americans have a sexual addiction, and more than 30% of all married individuals in the United States will engage in extramarital affair at some point during their marriage. 17% of all women admit to having a personal struggle with pornography addiction, and nearly half of all divorces list pornography as a contributing factor. So you ask yourself, are we out of control? I don't know. And then along with all these sexual habits and things comes diseases, infections, pregnancy, you name it. All these other things are fallouts from all this sexual addiction in this sex-crazed world. But to help me with these things tonight is my guest, Frank Kermit, who is an MD, a natural therapist and relationship coach who's covered under the natural path. I'm sure I'm probably saying that wrong. Insurance plans for private counseling. He teaches people about emotional needs for love, dating, sex, social skills, inner game, self-actualization, seduction, and all kinds of relationships. He's a best-selling author, educator, keynote speaker, and blogger, and he also has relationship columns. And he's going to share a lot of that with us, and with his expertise, we're going to help talk about some of these things tonight. So everybody, please help welcome to my show, Mr. Frank Kermit. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Thank you very much, Jill.
Now, what do you think about some of the things that I said in my introduction, especially with these addictions and all these things? If you caught any of that.
I did. I've been listening in. Let's start off by saying that sex is a part of life. And sex unto itself may not be the problem. It's people's relationship towards sex that is the problem. When you talked about how pornography is listed as one of the main contributors to a couple breaking up, I can also tell you that I work with couples where pornography can be used to bring them together, depending on how it's used, depending on how the couple shares it. Usually, pornography, just like the couple's sex life, is a symptom of something else that's wrong within the relationship. We're so quick to say, well, sex must be the culprit. I often find that people who identify sex as the main problem usually have an issue with sex. So it's easy to blame sex. But sex is an extension of a deeper connection that you have with another person. So sex unto itself is not necessarily the problem. Even a baseball bat, which is a tool we use for sport, when used in the wrong hands can become a horrible weapon and be blamed for the crime. But it's not the bat's fault. It's the person wielding the bat.
Right. Now, this, this whole sex craze thing that we're talking about as my topic of the show is sex craze in this sex craze world, the sexual health. I want to get into the aspect of, some of the fallout. I mean, just like you said earlier, and I totally agree with you, is that, we all want to put the blame on the sex, which is an easy scapegoat. But the reality of a lot of that is still some of the fallout of, the sex that maybe back in the day we didn't have the kind of education and, the internet and all that stuff. So, but now it's so, in our face right now.
It is in our face, and we're probably exposed to it a lot more than people were exposed to it before. But that's also because people respond to sex. That's why advertisers use it. That's why marketing experts will always push it. People respond to sex. Why? Most people like sex, or at the very least it catches their attention. And you got to be mindful of the fact that just because you respond to sex doesn't make sex a bad thing. It's all about getting an education and knowing how to manage your feelings towards sex. And that's where I think we're really lacking. In our society, we believe that ignorance is a form of protection. We keep our children ignorant about sex because we're trying to protect them from something. Ignorance has never been a form of protection, not a legitimate one anyway. The more ignorant you are, the more you are susceptible to being taken advantage of. So when we talk about, sex being used in bad ways, chances are we're also having to acknowledge the fact that people don't know enough about sex. They don't know its proper role, its proper function. They don't know how to fit sex within their lives. So, of course, it becomes more titillating to go out there and seek it out. As long as you remember, sex unto itself is not a good thing and it's not a bad thing, but it is a part of life. And the more you deny the reality of it, the more that reality will work against you.
So it's just like telling, especially if we're talking about our youth and everything, the more you tell them what they're not supposed to do and what they can't have, the more they want it.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, I agree with you with that statement, but it's a little bit more sinister than that. When you don't give somebody the information they need to learn about their own bodies, especially if we're talking about youth going through puberty, they need to be made aware of what's going on, because if they cannot trust the people who are there to care for them, to provide them with the right information, that youth is going to go seek it out from people who may not have the youth's best interest at heart. So let's use an example here. When a child is maturing, going through puberty, a woman will have a period for the very first time. A guy will go through, chances are, a wet dream for the very first time. If prior to that experience, if no one sat them down and say, look, this is what's going to happen to you. This is something that's going to occur. Your body is going to change at some point. Well, especially for a young girl who experiences a period, not being told anything about what's going to happen to her, well, keeping her ignorance of that is not helping her. It's not protecting her. If anything, it could become a traumatic experience as opposed to her being ready and being accepting of her body changing. And this is where we make the mistake. We start off by saying, no, we can't talk to our children about sex. Well, guess what? They're going to go out and learn it from someone else. And hopefully the person that they're learning it from isn't there to take advantage of children who have basically been neglected.
Now, help me out with this. I mean, I'm sure, me and you both know, but there's a lot of my listeners who have young boys. And it's quite obvious when a woman, a young lady goes through her, maturing as she gets her period and her cycle. How would a mom know when a young man has had a wet dream? What does that consist of?
Well, she may not know. If he catches it in time, there may not be a spill, there may not be a stain left behind. But it's not about waiting until it happens. When you see that your child is growing up, that's when you maybe have to take the child aside and say, look, there's something I want you to understand. Your body is going to change. You're going to change. You're growing up to be a young man. You're going to start to notice people differently. You're going to start noticing girls differently. You might start to notice hair growing in certain places. You might say, and you can talk about erections. You can talk about the penis. And it's important to prepare children for that process. And it doesn't matter if it's a mother talking to her son or a father talking to his daughter. It's about being a good parent and making sure that your children have the information they need and that they learn that they can trust you and that they can come to you with their sexual questions. When you see children who are being hurt by friends of the family and strangers, you're looking at children who didn't feel safe enough to go to their parents for help or comfort or get their questions answered. These children ended up going to other people for information and for some form of security that they weren't able to get at home.
I'm on with sorry, my throat is going. With Frank Kermit, and you can follow him on www.franktalkswithans.com. So you can see who I'm talking with and his expertise and all his books and everything while we're going along. Now, I remember Frank, back in the day, I was probably one of those guys who was very immature growing up because we didn't have sexual education the way we have it now and the internet and all that other stuff. And I can remember a time, which I feel really bad now, is that I remember when a young lady, had her period at school and didn't realize, that she had it and, didn't really know it was coming. And, and we made fun of her, laughed, and, and I feel really bad about that.
How bad do you feel? Honestly.
I mean, not that bad right now, but I mean, growing up into my knowledge base, looking back now, it's like, as you were speaking, it just brought me back to that. It's like the education part of it. Maybe if that girl had that education, she would have been prepared. And I'm sure there's some young girls out there now who hasn't had that conversation, or some mom hasn't had that conversation, and even with their little boys, and then they get around their friends in school, and then this happens, and you leaving them out there to be, ridiculed.
Well, part of the education I'm talking about is also the concept that this is something that's going to happen to everybody, and it's not something to be shamed or made fun of. That's also part of the education process. That when you see somebody going through that the first reaction isn't ridicule, that the first action isn't, I better attack somebody who's vulnerable right now. That's part of the education process. So just as just as past generations haven't been well informed about their sexual lives, part of that education is also teaching people not to attack somebody else because of their sexuality in any form.
Now, you just opened up something. I was going to save it for a second half, but I'll still save it for the second half of the show, because we're going to get into, that aspect of it about the sexuality, because that is a big thing these days, as far as sexual preference, across the board. I don't care if you're in the military, you're in the private sector, or you're making trillions of dollars. But we're going to get into that part later on in the second half of the show. But one of the things that I do want to talk about, we're talking about teens and stuff and sexual health in this part, is that a friend of mine had emailed me about a situation, and I know we spoke about it, yesterday, but had a young girl who has already had, she was probably 17 before she was 18 and already had 3 STDs. And I think one of them was chlamydia, and I can't remember what the other ones is. So if you're listening to me, text those to me so I can ask them. But she done already had like 3 STDs already by the time she was 18 years old.
All right, let's look at this situation. First of all, where were the parents, and do the parents have a conversation or an open dialogue going on with this young lady who by 18 had 3 STDs? Other questions. Did all 3 happen at the same time, coming from the same partner, or was this over the course of, let's say, from the time she was 13 to the time she was 18? Was there a progression? Something happened when she was 13, something happened when she was 15, then finally something that would happen when she was 18. Is there a repeating behavior pattern? Did she not learn her lesson the first time it happened? There's a lot we have to delve into here in terms of the context. Depending, again, on the ages and when all this happened, why would somebody that young be seeking that kind of sexual attention? Is it an appropriate sexual attention? Was it somebody in an authority position who was taking advantage? Or is she seeking some kind of validation, some kind of comfort or attention that she's not getting from other family figures in her life? These are the things that we would need to be looking at. Now, is it horrible that this poor young girl has got a number of sexually transmitted diseases by the time she's 18? Absolutely. But that, for me, is just scratching the surface. I want to find out about the context of that situation and where is the responsibility going on? Where's the education here for this girl? Where's the protection? I mean, if she had these things in her early teens, where's she finding the time to go out and contract these diseases? Are the parents aware of her whereabouts? Are they keeping track of it? And when someone tells me, yes, but I have a 16-year-old and I can't control my kid, well, yeah, you can. They're a minor. That's your job. So, again, I'm not trying to put the blame on the parents. Even teenagers need to take responsibility for their behaviors as well. I'm trying to find out, there's something in the system here where it's not the sex that's the problem. Oh, she had sex, now she has sexually transmitted diseases. If she had protected sex all the way through, chances are she wouldn't have had some of these sexually transmitted diseases. There's something going on here that goes beyond just the fact that this girl got sexually transmitted diseases. And the sex unto itself is a mere symptom of a deeper issue.
All right. Now, it was just texted me. It was these doctor words, trichomoniasis or something like that, and gonorrhea were 2 of them. And I think she may have had one of them twice. Okay. But again, I'm sure you understand.
Is it again? She had one of them more than once. Again, is it with the same partners? Is it with different partners?
Well, she had 2 of them from the same partner, one from a different partner.
So 2 of them from the same partner. So she got it from him once and then got it from him again?
Yes.
Okay. So where is the communication going on here? I mean, burn you once, okay, shame on you. Burn me twice, shame on me. There's something going on here. So I don't think that we're going to be able to properly address this in a 1-hour show, but I think this family needs some kind of intervention.
Oh, don't worry about it, Frank. Coming at the second half, we're going to talk about the parents.
Okay.
And I guess coming from this right here, because I'm sure there's probably even adults with these diseases and issues, just as this young child is, but where does that span to? Are these type of diseases prone to be open to others?
It's not the diseases unto themselves. It's the repeating behavior patterns that contracted the first disease that we need to look at. So I'll give you a very specific example here. Let's ignore the specific disease for a second.
Okay.
Let's just remove the name. Here's what we know. We know that a teenager contracted more than one disease before the age of majority. What do we know? We know that this teenager had ample access to have sex, that this teenager was not being monitored enough, that this teenager was able to be in a situation to have sex. We don't know if the partner that she was with was also a minor or if the person that she was with was an adult. At least I don't know. I haven't been privy to that information. But again, is that part of the reason why this teenager has had so much access? Are the parents aware? Are the parents even involved in spending time with this teenager and involving the teenager in extracurricular activities? One of the things that's suggested for teenagers is to keep them involved in some sort of an activity, whether it's a sport, whether it's encouraging them to pursue an interest, because it fills up their time. It keeps them busy. They don't have the opportunity to get into situations that have consequences that they may not have the maturity to understand, really. We all can choose our actions, but we don't choose the consequences of those actions. And I'm telling you, in my practice, I deal with adults who don't understand this concept. So if I'm dealing with adults who don't grasp that they don't control the consequences of the actions they choose, it's going to be even more difficult sometimes for a young person to really appreciate that there's consequences you cannot foresee, and these consequences can have dire effects that you can't even fathom right now. So that's what I'm focusing.
Now, it's interesting because I think, as you're talking, I'm receiving information on my Facebook. But I guess the guy, he was 19, and I'm assuming she was around 16, 17 around the time to answer that part of it. And like I said, coming after the break, it'll probably answer some of your questions about the parents. But now it's like, for those parents whose child have not been through this, and to prevent them from going through this, you said a lot of things, but what can they hone in on to not run that child away, just by, giving them information? But how would they come across and giving that information without, making it seem like you need to talk to me, or I need to talk to you about this?
Okay, there's one absolute thing that every parent right now can do, right now, today, and that is be so approachable when it comes to anything related to sex. Just be approachable. If your kid has a question, you don't belittle it, you don't snark at it, and you don't say things like, well, you don't need to know that. If your child is asking you, that means it's time. They need to know it now. And if you don't have the answer, be honest. I don't have that answer, but let's find that answer out together. And this is a way for the parents to also become informed.
And now also, what about the monitoring of things they watch and listen? Do you sit down with them and educate them on the things that they're watching, as well, and hearing, because they're receiving information from somewhere because of internet? They could sit and be watching porn on their phone.
The thing to remember is that when a child is demanding privacy, and you have to allow your child to have some privacy, if that child has already proven that they are at risk for any sort of reason, your job as a parent to protect your child overrides your child's need for privacy. I know this is not a popular attitude to have, but I'm saying this as both a teenager who grew up in a very excessively strict household, which also is not good. I've had that extreme, and I'm saying this as a father as well. There has to be a balance where you say, okay, I don't want to suffocate my kid, but I need my kid to be able to decipher what kind of images they're going to see and what kind of information they're going to have. And again, a completely non-judgmental, open dialogue. If your kid feels comfortable enough to come to you and ask any question, and know that even if you're uncomfortable with it, you're still going to sit down and you're going to be open and accepting to all of their questions and their comments, that's when you create a trust that nobody else will be able to break. But there is such a mistrust between children and parents. And I mean, this is a whole other topic here. But if you really want to get to the point, if you really want to get to the point where you want to protect your child from anybody out there who may want to take advantage, even if that person taking advantage of your child is not doing it in a malicious way, but they're just simply not the best person to be giving that child any sort of information or providing that child with access to certain things they may not be able to handle. You got to make sure that your child knows that you are in your kid's corner, and that no matter what your kid comes up to you with, and it could be something small, you're there to be accepting, to be helpful, to be encouraging, to be loving, and say, no matter what it is, come to me. We'll work it out. Does that always work? Does that guarantee anything? No. This is real life. And human beings are going to make mistakes, and human beings are going to go out and try something. The first part is make sure that you take on a completely non-judgmental role. And when I deal with a parent who says, yeah, but I don't feel comfortable with it, you know what? Too bad. You stepped up for this job. You wanted to be a parent. Well, be a parent. This is it. There's things you're going to have to do that you're not going to like being a parent. Well, that's life.
And it's so funny, Frank, is because as I was a recruiter, in the military for probably 15, 16 years. And I remember going out to these schools in probably the latter part of, 2007-ish, 8-ish. And we used to, travel and go into the schools, and I used to talk to the teachers. And we used to go to the middle schools, which between, 5, 6, 7th graders. And they would tell me some things that I would just be jaw-dropping to me because I didn't realize it was going on, was that these kids were very sexually active in the 5th and 6th grade, 7th grade, where they caught kids doing oral sex on each other, getting caught having sex, and it was very stunning to me that these kids know, like when I was in the 5th and 6th grade, I wasn't thinking about none of that stuff.
Yeah, but at that time, you weren't even exposed to those images to show examples. And now children are presented with images that's not necessarily something they've ever even had the concept of. So when I was in 6th grade, the concept that the pornography even existed was just beyond my scope. Like I couldn't even fathom that even existed. Nowadays, you got a kid who's in the 6th grade, chances are they have been bombarded with pornography images a lot more than most people think. And monkey see, monkey do. They see a lot of these images, and of course now they may be curious. They're not necessarily thinking, oh wow, I got to go have sex. It could just be a matter of, well, this is interesting. I didn't know that people could do that. Well, how does that work? And before you know it, they could be experimenting with their friends out of nothing more than curiosity. Now, if you structure a family unit where there may be elements that are missing, there may be monitoring that's missing, there may be an open communication, open dialogue with the parents that's missing. Maybe the fact is the parents think everything is fine and they're not putting enough attention. Maybe the family has a special needs sibling that's getting all of the attention, and the other siblings will say, okay, well, you're okay. You don't need the extra attention, and they're getting neglected or they're being ignored. And, sex is a pleasurable thing. That's why it's addictive. Anything that offers pleasure has the potential to be a source of an addiction. And sex is a source of pleasure. So you're being ignored, you're being neglected. Now here's something that'll make you feel some sense of pleasure, and now I'm getting attention for it. I've seen images that this is what people do. Okay, I'll try it. So it's not on the same level as, some 25-year-old adults would be engaging into it.
Yeah, because it's like, like I said, I'm sure with your forums, I get the emails and the calls as well, where I have the parents who have went on their kids, email or internet and found porn sites and all this other stuff. And it's like, you have the kids who's like, you're invading my privacy, Mom. It's my phone and, you're invading my space. And a lot of parents back down and they don't follow through with that. So, they run from, like you said earlier, you took on this responsibility. You have to go beyond that immature mind of that child who really doesn't know what they're tapping into, and you have to protect them.
That's right. Look, one of the things I teach in my monogamy program, Making Monogamy Work, and this is something I receive an incredible amount of resistance on, is that if you are being faithful to your partner and there is no monkey business going on and you're not even flirting with somebody else, your partner should have the passwords to all of your email addresses and contact information and vice versa. I'm not talking about a couple that's just dating, and they've been together for 4 months and they've only just gotten exclusive. I'm talking about a married couple who's been together for 2 or 3 years. I got news for you. You are now a couple. You are now a unit, if you want to think of it that way. Sometimes I even encourage couples to have a joint Facebook page, have a joint email address. And when people say, yeah, but then, people can't communicate with me privately there. Well, depending on who the person is and what kind of privacy you're talking about, your partner should have a very clear idea as to what's going on in your life. And when I coach couples who are in open relationships, it's basically the same thing. If you're in an open relationship, depending on how you want to structure it, or whether you're in a monogamous relationship, your partner needs to know your passwords. Your partner better know what's going on in your life, and you need to know what's going on in your partner's life. If we're willing to do that with adults in a partnership, in a marriage, you're surely going to be doing that for a child who, again, may not have the life experience or the maturity to appreciate the consequences of these actions.
Now, with that being said, Frank, we're going to go to a break, because when you're talking about passwords and codes and people's phones and cells, that leads me right into what we're going to talk about next hour, because we're going to talk about the parents of the young girl when we come back. And just as crazy as they are, and I guess I can say crazy, but it may be normal to them, but their world, and then we're going to see how this all comes together. So for those who are enjoying Frank, because they're texting me right now, they're enjoying you, Frank, you can follow him at www.franktalks, and that's Frank Talks with an S.com, and you can, check out Frank, and you can send him some, information as well to his stuff, and email him and tell him how you like his participation on the show tonight. But it's great information. But we're not finished. We're going to be back right after this break with more Frank, GL, and artistfirst.com. We'll be right back. All right, Frank, I guess we're not going to a break.
All this time I've been thinking, boy, that commercial must be playing in the background because I can't hear it.
Corey, he must be in the bathroom somewhere. You know I'm going to mess with him.
All right.
Yeah, but it's all right. We can keep going. I don't know what something must be going on with this stuff, but they can still hear us. But we're going to go on and let's talk about the parents now. All right. Now, I'm going to give you a scenario about the parents of the young girl who we were talking about. For those of you who are tuning in, now to the show, we're talking about a young girl who has already contracted 3 STDs by the time she was 16, 17 years old. She done already had gonorrhea, tricho, and some other stuff. I think she had trichomonas twice and then gonorrhea. But now let me ask you before I go into her parents, do those things go away? Any of those go away? Or are they there reoccurring, or do they subside?
I think that's a question best reserved for someone who's a sexually transmitted disease expert.
All right, well, we're going to have to get somebody on the show. We're going to talk about a lot of these diseases and the severeness of some of these things. I'm going to do a show on that. So we'll come back to that on another show. But now the parents, Frank. The parents of this young lady, when you're talking about passcodes and codes and access, do you think that when people don't allow others to have that access to their stuff, that they're hiding something?
Not necessarily. It's not necessarily that they're hiding something. It really depends on when it's brought up, because a person just may have a certain sense of privacy. Sometimes they're worried about things that their friends have shared with them that they are holding in confidence that they don't want to share with people. However, even those things can become a threat to the marriage. So my take on it is when I get into coaching, especially when I do premarital coaching, because I do work with couples who are engaged to be married, and my job in those sessions is really to ask them very hard questions, to really test the boundaries and say, how well do you know your partner, and are you sure that you're ready to handle all the baggage that this comes with? And that is, it's at that time I say, look, are you prepared to give your partner every single password to every single account you have? And if there's any hesitation, then you really need to, reconsider if you want to build a future with someone who you wouldn't trust with all of your secrets. So if somebody says, no, I'm not going to give it, well, let's hold on here. If they have been operating up until this point by not sharing that information, that might be a jarring issue for reasons other than I'm hiding something. However, if a person is not doing anything wrong and they fully communicate to everybody who communicates with them, by the way, my wife or my husband, don't write me anything personal that you wouldn't want them to know because they do check my account. That's the benefit of deciding to do that ahead of time before you get serious or as you're getting serious. So you have this marker, as of this date. Don't send me anything because my partner and I have an agreement that we have access to each other's account. If you don't want my partner to know your details, don't post them to me, don't write them to me. So no, it's not a direct indication that somebody is hiding something. However, if after they've had a chance to clean up their account, if they're still not willing to share it, that for me is a red flag.
And then that's when you should probably sit back and go, And that just pretty much, that makes somebody want to dig.
Well, my philosophy, honestly, at this point, my philosophy is if you have to dig that much, the real question you should be asking is, why would you want to be with somebody who you have to dig that much for?
My point exact, Frank. You took the words right out of my mouth.
One of the things that I teach in my works is that when you're looking for long-term relationship success, it's about accepting the person as is. If you're going to a dealership and you're buying a piece of furniture or an appliance, and they say, you buy it as is, that's what it is. You take a person as they are, not in terms of what you think you could change them to become. It's as is. As is means you're going to be willing to accept their past. But if you have something in your past you're not willing to share, or if there's something in your partner's past you don't even want to ask because if I find out the truth, I may have to break up. Listen, if you're already taking that attitude, don't get involved in a serious relationship.
Yeah. Now, I was talking about the parents. I know we're going to run out of time, but the parents. What happened was with the parents is that the wife was sitting down. The husband apparently went to take a shower. The phone buzzed or went off or whatever it did, and one of those iPhone type thingamajigs, and there was a message on there from a guy. So she happened to look down, but then popped up a nude picture of a man. Okay. So she was like, what is this? And so that, in turn, she wasn't probing for anything, but this popped up in her face. So she started digging and looking and started finding more nude pictures of men in her husband's phone. And then she started digging some more and found pictures of her husband being sent to these men in the nude to other men. And then there was content of language about, I can't wait to see you. I can't wait for you to be in me. I can't wait for you to do these things, blah, 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 blah. And that opened up the door for the husband to say to her that he enjoys being with men. And this is the parents of the 17, 16-year-old young lady who had those diseases. And then they were in Mardi Gras, this past Mardi Gras, and he quote unquote randomly, supposedly picked a couple out of the streets of New Orleans and paid them for for them to watch them have sex. Now this was all thrusted upon this woman, and so now she's sitting here dealing with her active children, who apparently the son was having sex since he was 11 years old, and now the dad comes out that he likes men, And now this woman is sitting here just like my world is crumbling.
Wow. My heart really goes out to her. I can only imagine what she must be going through. First of all, she's dealing with her kids who are probably getting involved in experiences that they, again, can't fully appreciate the consequences to. And instead of having a tight relationship with her partner, her husband, who, whose primary function right now has to be to step into the role of being a good father. If I was coaching this couple together, I would say, look, forget about your extracurricular activities right now. Forget about your extracurricular sex. Your number one priority right now is to refocus the family on the welfare of your kids and to get involved in your kids' life. And find out where these kids are getting the time to go out and explore these things. Again, where are the parents? It sounds like he's got a life outside of his marriage, but again, it's the common behavior pattern here. Let's look at the common behavior pattern. Everybody has got a secret life going on, and nobody knows anything. And the father's secret life, because obviously he has to put in time into that, is the time that he's not spending with his kids, and they're filling up their time with their own secret lives. So the focus has got to be, hey, forget about these extracurricular activities, forget about having sex with other people right now. And just so you know, it isn't because of the deception involved. I actually counsel couples in open relationships, or couples in transition, couples that were in open relationships becoming more monogamous couples who want to experiment with open relationships. And one of the common things I bring up is that when you got an issue to deal with in your home base, specifically if you have children, forget the extracurricular activities. Forget the extracurricular sex. Focus on your kids. Get back to that. Because extracurricular sex will always be there down the road. But during a child's formative years, as they're entering from infancy into childhood, from childhood into adulthood, your goal, your role is to be a majorly strong influence and give your kid an awesome start to life. So that's what I would be saying here. It sounds like everybody in that family is living some kind of a secret life, and it's only now becoming apparent to the mother. I would also be curious to find out if, on some level, did the father in this situation know about the secret lives of his kids, but figured, well, I got my secret life, so since I am entitled to my secret life out of guilt, maybe I'll allow them to have a secret life. We don't know.
Well, I know that... Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I know that apparently, they buy them, the kids, like they're driving Mercedes, he's a well-to-do, person in the community. So I think that he's buying them, and you're probably right, Frank, because of his own world and his own guilt, but apparently, these kids would stay out all time of night, go do what they want to do. So apparently there were no monitoring. And like you said, if he has his own world, he has to escape at some time to go indulge in his world. So, where is he? And the mom, I have no idea.
Well, I'm very curious because you brought up the issue that the husband went and paid this other couple to watch them have sex. Can you be clear here to me? Did he pay a couple so that he could watch the couple have sex? Or did he pay the couple to watch him and his wife have sex?
Okay, what happened was that the wife was feeling like she said that she wasn't satisfying him. Apparently, during sex, their sexual acts or whatever, that he wasn't fulfilled. So he suggested that they watch another couple have sex. So he picked up a couple off the streets of New Orleans, but him and his wife to watch that couple have sex. And she was saying like she just went along with it because she felt like maybe she'll try something new and different. But for me personally, I don't think that this is new to the husband.
Not only is it not new to the husband, I mean, he just did it with ease. What he's doing right now is emotional manipulation. Okay? For him to say, oh, yeah, honey, well, you didn't satisfy me, that's why I'm going to do this. sorry, I disagree, because even if, let's assume, even if she wasn't satisfying him in bed, first of all, if he's got a sexual orientation of either bisexual, maybe he's gay, and he's living a double life so that, he has to keep up appearances, it can't be her responsibility to satisfy his sexual desires when, A, he never communicated them to her, and B, if his sexual orientation is devoid of her having the opportunity to do it. Okay, if he is a homosexual man, he can't turn around to his female wife and say, well, you're not the one who sexually satisfies me. If it's not within the capacity of his sexual orientation, then she's not to blame for that. Number two, for him to turn around and say, you don't satisfy me sexually, does not justify the lying, does not justify the deception. Those things were in place way before she maybe even got into the picture. I don't know the specifics of this couple, but I would have to assume that this guy had some inkling that he had an interest to be with men before he even started being her husband. So those are the factors, again, that I would be looking at. I'm not going to. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. For him to put the blame on her, well, you're just not hot enough. You're not satisfying me, or whatever the terminology was. He decided to be deceptive. He's turning around trying to make her feel like it's her fault, and it's not. And this is emotional manipulation.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, because this has probably been my biggest debate, and maybe you'll be able to answer it for me, is that when it comes to men and bisexuality or gay, most men, you're either gay, there's no bisexuality, because men just are not built that way. There's no in-between, right?
You know what? I'm going to go as far as saying that I think there's a spectrum, and generally speaking, most of the men I've encountered are either very, very straight or very, very gay. And there's very few that are on that spectrum, on that realm. Is that to say that there are none? No. Because you also have the issue on the bisexual range of being physically attracted to one gender and being able to emotionally connect with a different gender. So there's an incredible range there. The same thing that with some women, for most of their lives, they'll only be attracted to one gender or the other. But in the right circumstance, with the right kind of encouragement, the right kind of acceptance, maybe just the opportunity to experiment may open up a whole new world for them. Okay, maybe they're pansexual. Maybe there's something beyond the genders that they're attracted to. So I don't honestly care if most men are gay, most men are straight, very few bi, and they're not bi. That's not the issue here. The issue is this marriage got together under a false pretense. Now what do we do? And the time that was spent maintaining this false pretense, the kids right now are suffering because the attention that should have been on them was spent on maintaining the false pretense. You got a guy who has probably been lying to himself most of his life. Probably has a certain amount of issues unto himself. Maybe he feels guilty. Maybe he feels, and that's why he allowed, himself to shank on responsibilities. Maybe because he's so wealthy, he feels entitled, saying, "Well, I'm wealthy. I've earned my money. I support them, and so I get away with this." You have a woman that's going along with it, and despite the obvious fact that he's been deceiving her this entire time, is blaming herself for something that she's not responsible for. And she's going along with these new experiences while her kids are really just out of control. There's an entire dynamic here that needs to be addressed. So I don't care about... Go ahead.
No, Sam, I think it's beyond, his coming out or whatever he's doing. My advice was to tell, my friend to tell them or her is to put all that stuff aside, stop making this about him, and to go get checked. Because, we're talking sexual health here, is that she first and foremost needs to go get checked. He needs to go get checked. And yes, the son needs to go get checked. I think the whole house needs to go get checked.
My advice is let's put their sexual lives on hold for a second. Let's focus on these kids. Let's make sure these kids get back on track, that they get their education, that they find a meaning in their life, that they find a path, a calling in life, and that they're not going to let their sexual experiences deter them from opportunities to have a more fulfilling life down the road. As far as
well, let me bring you to date, Frank, before you answer that, before you speak. The girl now is off in college. I think she's in her first year at college, and the friend who really talks to her that she's still sexually active, and she's saying she got condoms, she's learned a lesson, whatever, but that's neither here nor there because we're not in that room with her.
Right.
But she is off doing her thing now and has not settled down. I think the young boy is still at home. He's throwing house parties, getting high and all kind of stuff. I think he's a senior or junior in high school now, while the parents were off romping off in Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
So I don't know, if there's any stability there to be grasped to, with these kids.
And there may not be, unless there's a form of intervention where maybe a school counselor from the school can possibly get involved. But the boy in this situation has to go and ask for help, or at least somebody with sense of authority has to be notified that this is what's going on. He may not see it as a problem because right now he's looking at it through the lens of a 16-year-old. Hey, I get to do what I want. I get to party. I get to have sex. I get to get stoned. Life is so good. Not realizing that he's not in control of what's going to happen to him, of the consequences of these decisions he's taking. And this couple are, for lack of a better term, they simply sound lost. And I'm telling you this, that it's not the fact that he has a different sexual orientation, whether he's bi or gay or wanting to be married. I have dealt with couples in all kinds of open relationship structures, in all kinds of what I call non-monogamy. And it's not about whether they have sex with other partners. It's about how they manage their relationship, what rules they set, why those rules are important to them, and the communication in that relationship. It's not about pushing monogamy. It's not about saying monogamy is okay or necessary evil. Either relationship structure is fine. It's about how you conduct yourself. If you're conducting yourself with deceit, and the real issue I see here, they're doing it to the point now of escapism, and that escapism is taking away attention from the most important aspect here, which is being parents to their children. So, you don't let your sex life interfere with your responsibilities to your family.
Yeah, and I agree, Frank. I think that, that putting all that sexual stuff aside, it's like, where do you go now? Where do you move forward from here? And anybody that may be going through something, out there, and you are faced with these type of scenarios and situations, it's like, you have to be able to put that stuff aside and say, hey, where do we go from here? How do we fix this, or do we go our separate ways?
Usually when I deal with a couple going through any sort of transition that's involving sex, change of sexual orientation, or, experimenting or something of that nature, look at what it is you valued about the previous relationship structure you were in. If you can find a way to have those values respected in a new relationship structure, stay together. If you cannot respect the values of the previous relationship structure in the new relationship structure, that's when you may have to part ways. That's it.
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate. And for people, again, I'm with Frank Kermit, and you can check him out at www.franktalks.com. And he has, his coaching, personalized coaching here, his books, his CDs, programs, a wealth of knowledge, as you can hear, as well as some of his topic and his blogs and everything. And, we didn't even touch the surface on Frank's knowledge and everything, because he has so much on here. So definitely you will be hearing more of Frank if he's, willing to come back on, and we're going to tackle some other subjects as well.
This has been a fantastic interview. I can't wait to come back on.
Now, Frank, what advice, and not just about that family, but those who are, probably having those type of problems, these teens, this whole sex thing that's craze that, is unfortunate that you cannot stop them from getting this information, stop them from, wanting to experiment with these things. It's like we virtually cannot be with our kids, 24/7, 7 days a week, and especially with the technology. But what can we do? What can you leave them with, in response to that type of stuff?
The advice I have for all parents who are worried about this, accept the fact. You have to be accepting of the fact that you're not going to be able to hide it from your kids, so you have to use it to your advantage. You have to educate your kids to learn how to interpret this. You have to educate your children to understand that what they may see on a screen on a computer doesn't necessarily represent what an emotionally healthy relationship is. That there's having sex and there's finding love, and that they're not equal. One does not automatically indicate the other. And that, yes, there are some people that as a profession or as a hobby, they may decide to expose themselves in a way on the internet, but that doesn't make it okay for everybody to do it. And you shouldn't feel pressured to do anything that you don't feel comfortable doing. You don't have to imitate what you see on the screen. It's something private for yourself, and if you're not ready, say no or don't talk about it. And again, the advice is always the same. Make sure that they know they can come to you, because these kids are going to go to somebody. They will have questions. Sex is a part of life. They're going to ask questions. They're going to need somebody. It's best that it's you. And if you are not comfortable with sex, then damn it, get comfortable with sex. And make sure that they know that they can trust you, their parents.
Yeah, and that's some great advice, Frank. I tell you, you're a wealth of knowledge, but we have a few more minutes here, and I want to throw out some stats to you all real quick. When it comes to American teens and sexuality and that whole reproductive health thing, it's saying that although only 13% of teens have had sex by age 15, most initiate sex in their later teen years by their 19th birthday. 7 in 10 female and male teens have had intercourse. On an average, young people have sex for the first time at about the age 17, give or take, but they do not marry until their mid-20s. So, you play with those numbers all you want. Basically, what we're saying is that, sex is growing, the sexual experience is growing, the way that they're watching these celebrities on TV that are making it cool to have sex and have threesomes and foursomes and orgies and all these things, and it's okay to be lesbians and all the stuff. So like, I have nothing against lesbians or gays or whatever, but what I have a problem with is the lack of knowledge that we're passing on to these kids who have no idea what they're tapping into and what they're getting into, and psychologically they're being damaged. It's almost like you're stripping their brain cells away from them by not talking to them, by not sitting down with them. Do they really know what they're getting into when you see these young girls kissing other girls and walking down the street and doing all these things because they think it's cool, but emotionally they're being destroyed? What do you have to say about that, Frank, real quick before we get off the air? I know I have a few more minutes.
I can conclude this very quickly. It's something that I teach very regularly and very intensely. This applies to teenagers, but it applies to adults as well. Here it is. It's one of my Frankisms. The power of choice, without the knowledge to know what to do with it, can lead to a misery that is worse than being in a system of oppression where you're not allowed to think for yourself. It's great that we live in a time of choice. It's great that we're celebrating sexuality in new ways and that people don't have to be ashamed of their sexual orientation. But when you push all this choice onto a young person and to adults as well, they have all the choice in the world, but they have no clue what to do with that choice. That could be just as bad, if not worse, than being in a system that doesn't allow for any choice.
And there you have it. Frankisms, GL-isms, Artist First isms, and I promise you definitely you will hear more from Frank Kermit, franktalks.com. I appreciate you being on the show, man. It was great.
I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to the next time.
Yeah, because we totally went in a direction we didn't even talk about off the air, but it was great.
This is good. I liked it.
Had a good time. So, yeah, they're enjoying you. So for everybody, you can go to franktalks.com, message him, let him know what you think, and of course, hit me up on my Facebook. My email is glhenderson1@hotmail.com, and you can send me your information, what type of shows you want us to do. Go check out the archive, and also if you want to be a sponsor to the show, just hit me up at glhenderson1@hotmail.com and let me know what it is you want to pitch and what you want to do, whether you're artist, author, business, entrepreneur, whatever it is. Just get with me and I'll help you out. So until next Thursday, I want to say much love to my beautiful butterfly out there, to everybody listening across the world, to GL Henderson, Artist First Worldwide Radio. Until next week, much love from GL.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. Coaching available in person, by phone, and by Skype. For singles, couples, and alternative lifestyles, franktalks.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, or relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationships? Visit franktalks.com.
If you need help with your relationships, my buddy Frank, he's got some tips. Just go to franktalks.com. His advice is better than your mom's. He knows what you're going through, 'cause Frank has been there too. So log on to franktalks.com. franktalks.com.
What do you do when you feel like a fool? When your heart has been broken again? Pick up the phone or get onto Skype and talk on a private session. Yeah, get a little help from Frank Talks. Whoa, whoa, get by with a little help from Frank Talks. You gotta try a little help from Frank Talks. What do you do when your love goes away? Try coaching one-on-one. How do I sign up to turn things around? Just sign up at franktalks.com. Yeah, get by with help from Frank Talks. I get by with a little help the best rate going around. Oh, it's worth every cent that you will put down. Yeah. FrankTalks.com. Oh, you got to go to. Get your help from FrankTalks.com. Yeah, yeah. FrankTalks.com. Would you believe that Frank gets results? Yes, we're certain. Just read the reviews. Frank knows his stuff, and Frank's several goods. Good love can soon come to you.